Hey, what's up, all? Just a quick check here. Check, 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 check. All right. So, check, check. Okay. So yeah, full disclosure, I'm going to be bouncing around. This wasn't something I had planned out. I'm just bored, and I've been watching stuff about this Mueller, AG Barr's letter that he gave to Congress about the Mueller report and his conclusions of it. And I've just been watching the reactions. I'm involved in different websites like Above Top Secret, where I'm reading people's reactions, both people that thought the investigation was a witch hunt from the get-go, and other people that are still defending it or are now saying that somehow Mueller's compromised and things like that. And I just wanted to get some reaction out. So this isn't something that I've really planned. I'm just doing for fun right now. I will say at the outset of this that I'll be doing a live stream with my friend Drone Tech tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern time, I believe. So check that out. I'll put a link to his YouTube channel and everything, so you can check that out. But yeah, let's just get going. So what are some of the important things to talk about? Now, I'm trying to do something a little different during this live stream, where I have some I'll be putting up things like different articles and things like that I want to talk about. So I don't know if anyone will even watch this, but yeah, you can see in my box there I'll have different articles up and things like that. So it might look unprofessional, but trust me, I'm just doing it for fun right now. It's not something that I had planned out. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about is I've been doing several streams on this, several videos that I've done on this. So I wanted to talk about some of the things. The first was the video I did that I think, two videos I did that are really important on this that are worth referencing right now is one, this idea of transparency. So what you're seeing, a lot of the reaction from the media and people like that are saying, oh, okay, we're not going to trust Barr. We want to see the entire Mueller report ourselves. And I agree. I want to see as much of that as possible. But notice how the very people saying that had the exact opposite reaction when we were talking about releasing things like the Nunez memo or the FISA warrant and things of that nature. Back then, they were saying that no, transparency was bad. We didn't want to have this transparency because it was jeopardize the FBI, would jeopardize sources and methods, and that not only would it be bad to be transparent, but it would be obstruction of justice because there were still ongoing investigations that somehow had something to do with Mueller. You constantly see this also when it comes to people that are testifying in front of Congress. If you watched any of these testimonies, it was constantly this type of thing. They would say, oh, well, I can't answer this because there's Strzok, for example, would say this, or Page would say this, or Comey would say this. Constantly it would be, oh, we can't answer that in a public forum because there's still ongoing investigations. So this is a clever way. So by the time all of the investigations into this would end, it'll be 10 years down the road, and then no one will care about the answers anymore. Well, I do care, and I want this to be as transparent as possible. But we saw how all these people in the FBI, people in the political realm like Schiff and others, Pelosi, Schumer, people like that, were all saying, no. Trump can't declassify this stuff. It'd be obstruction of justice, and also it would hurt the country and things like that. Now those same people are saying the exact opposite. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Aren't they saying, oh, but we still have investigations? For example, the House is now going to have a new investigation. And they've subpoenaed 81 people close to Trump. And there's still the Southern District of New York investigation. And so that's going to be a big deal. Yet despite all of this, they're now saying, all of a sudden now, it doesn't matter. We could release information. We could release grand jury testimony. We could release the results of Mueller's finding to the public despite those ongoing investigations occurring. All of a sudden, the story's changed. Again, I agree with them. I want to see the Mueller report released. I just want to point out the hypocrisy. And it wasn't just hypocrisy saying, I don't think Trump should release the FISA warrant. It was them saying it would be a crime for Trump to release the FISA warrant, it would be obstruction of justice, and it would hurt our country, and it would endanger lives at the FBI and sources and methods, and jeopardize the FBI's ability to do things like have investigations in the future, which could jeopardize national security and lives. That's what we were told by all these same Democrat politicians, all these same media people. That's why we couldn't have transparency then, right? But now it's, oh, we need to have transparency. Betty O'Rourke even came out and said that if we don't get to see the whole Mueller report, who knows, it could be the end of the country by the end of the year. We won't make it to the next year in our country. That's how insane and zealotry, the insane zealotry that these people have. It's absolutely ridiculous. And I think it's worth pointing out. Again, I still am calling for this to be released. But if you look at my video that I just did, and this video is where I go piece by piece through the Barr's actual letter that he had to Congress, which maybe I'll bring up here later and go through it again. But it says specifically, he outlines the specific laws that say that until he goes through a court and gets orders to be able to release this information, it is actually illegal for him to release facts that came out in a grand jury. And it makes sense why these laws exist, because you don't want someone who's been impaneled on a grand jury to have information about them be released. Let's say a grand jury was being subpoenaed on, a mafia boss or something like that. You don't want the grand jury's information to then get out there, the methods, the people that were involved and things like that to get out there. So it makes sense that we have these laws. Now, Barr has came out, as has Trump, and said he wants this to be as transparent as possible, wants it to be released. Barr said things similarly, that he would legally release everything he could, and that he felt that it was the duty of the people to have this. And so we'll see what ends up happening. But I think that, I would like to see as much of this released as possible. But it isn't ironic how quickly this story changes. Of course, it's nothing new for these establishment Democrats. Again, I'll say as a caveat from the beginning, because I have a lot of friends that identify as Democrat, but I'm trying to convince them else. I'm not talking about them. I'm not talking about every Democrat person. I'm not talking about your local township that has a Democrat. I'm talking about the people in charge of the Democratic Party, the Pelosi's, the Schumers, all the people running for president, and their media mouthpieces that are just shills for them. They all were against transparency when it came to possible dangers and crimes committed by the FBI or Obama's administration, but now they're for transparency when it comes to the Mueller report. And I don't know what they seek to gain from it. Now let's think about that. People are saying, well, we can't trust what Barr said about the Mueller report until, let's see what they they say we can't trust what Barr says about the Mueller report because he's been appointed by Trump. Well, I'll get to why that's stupid here in a second, but he directly quotes from Mueller when he talks about how there was no collusion from anyone or no conspiring with Russians for Trump or anyone in his campaign regarding the 2016 elections. That's it. That's the story in a nutshell. That was what this entire thing was about. Everything. So it doesn't, if this was untrue, now remember, the last story that was untrue that we saw that was being pushed by the media, Mueller's team actually came out like that day or the next day and said, no, this story's not true. I forget what the exact push was, but remember there was this story being pushed that said Mueller's team had evidence of something, and Mueller actually out of character came out and said, no, actually the media has that wrong. So do you really think that all day, if Barr came out and was blatantly misinterpreting Mueller's words, that Mueller wouldn't come out and say, no, actually I did say there was collusion? Of course he would. Of course there would have been leaks from his mostly Democrat people on his team that would have released this. But instead we see the exact opposite. So I think that you would have to be really, really conspiratorial to believe that Barr is so stupid that he comes out and directly he fake quotes Mueller from his own report about collusion. That's insanity. That's just not what happened. And so we could put to bed the rest, the idea that Trump colluded with Russia. Does this, I'll get to that in a second. But you see what I'm saying? The idea that all of a sudden now, oh, well, maybe we have to wait. Again, I still want to see exactly what Mueller said. That doesn't mean I think that Mueller had integrity or anything like that. I think Mueller was terrible. I think that he showed who he was when he deleted the iPhones that he gave Strzok and Page so that the IG couldn't see the text message they engaged in. But nonetheless, even someone who had every reason to hate Trump that was engaged in this witch hunt came out and said, yeah, there was no proof of any collusion. That's a total exoneration. Also, you know that this is a total exoneration because the second part of obstruction, right? Everyone's making, this is what the media wants to focus on. They just want to skip over the collusion part and focus on the second part of obstruction where, yeah, I will, thanks. But they want to focus on the second part of obstruction, and they say, it says that he didn't exonerate him of obstruction. Well, that proves that that's different than the first part, which is collusion. So clearly Mueller did exonerate Trump of collusion. The second part of obstruction is far, far less. It's only a resultant of the original witch hunt, which was all these claims made by people involved in Obama administration's DOJ and intel community, people involved in the Hillary Clinton campaign and people they paid, and their mainstream media mouthpiece outlets, which is 95% of the mainstream media, that are no longer journalists. They're just mouthpieces for the intel community and the Democratic Party. They were the ones that made these claims of Russia collusion. That's what started this whole ball rolling in the first place. That's why people, even as far as July in 2016, before the election, were being spied on by Obama's administration. And that's why it got blown up in the media. That's why the P dossier became a big story. That's why every day Rachel Maddow says Russia 500 times on our show. The entire mainstream media is obsessed with the idea that Trump was a Russian agent. I saw Fox News I was watching earlier that's had a poll up that said 2 days ago they did a poll. And this is Fox News. And that poll asked, do you think that Trump or people in his campaign colluded with Russia to help with the election? 44% of people polled said yes. They think that there was evidence of that. That's a lie. The reason that number is so high, there was never proof, no evidence whatsoever of that shown. The reason that number is so high is because the Democrats control the cultural institutions of power that we see. And so, of course, when they control the mainstream media, academia, the entertainment industry, Silicon Valley, where the only place that conservatives or people that weren't buying into this narrative could actually have a voice was places like Fox News that many people were never going to watch because, look, I'm not claiming Fox News is fantastic or anything. There's plenty of reasons to criticize them as well. But certainly people that are independent or on the left are not going to watch Fox News, so they're getting all their information from all these other institutions. And so the average person, the only other place to get information is places like social media and things like that. And we can see even that's being pushed by the establishment Democrats to censor that. And the Silicon Valley's buying into it. Places like Twitter shadow banning or outright banning conservatives and things like that. So that we could see 44% of people polled on Fox News. Now, again, take polls with a grain of salt, but there are certainly tons of people that even up until today were like, yep, Trump, we know that Trump colluded and Trump and his people colluded with Russians. They're Russian agents. That's insanity. It just goes to show you how much work we have to do, how brainwashed people are. And you can't blame people. I mean, yeah, maybe some of the people watching these channel, and I guess you all in the comment section, are a little more informed of exactly what's going on. But that's because we're weird nerds in some point. We do a lot of research. We're trying to think for ourselves. We're trying to get information from different points of views. And that's what we should all be trying to do if we're going to take an interest in this stuff. And so we were able to kind of see through this garbage. But the average person, you're working 9 to 5, you go on, you turn Jimmy Fallon on at the night, and all you hear is about Trump being a Russian agent. Maybe you don't like Fallon, so you go to Kimmel. Oh, you hear the same thing. Let's go over to Colbert. Oh, you hear the same thing. Let's go over to Conan. Oh, you hear the same thing. Let's turn on SNL. Oh, the same thing. Maybe I'll just watch a movie. Oh, all the people involved in that movie say the same thing. Geez, I'll turn it over to my local news. Oh, it's saying the same thing. Screw it. I'll just go to my class. I'm tired of this. Oh, my professors are saying the same thing. Well, you know what? Then I'll go to Twitter. Oh, everyone that's saying something different is being shadow banned, almost all of them. So I'm just getting the same thing. The confirmation bias, no matter how critically thinking you are, if you don't really take the time to look into this stuff, it's going to be difficult for you to see through the garbage. And that's how this narrative's been able to be spun so bad. That's exactly what we're seeing. And so all of them told us, right? All of these people said, over and over and over, we just heard, trust us. Listen, when the Mueller report comes out, it'll show all. Mueller's got the goods. Mueller, because remember, we already had 2 investigations. We already had the House Intel Committee investigation and the Senate investigation. Both of them came up inconclusive that there was Russia collusion with members of the Trump team. They didn't have any evidence. They weren't recommending anything like, I think there probably is only 2 people in the chat. I'm not the most popular YouTuber. I don't care. If I have 1 person watch, that's happy for me. I'm just like talking about this stuff. So, anyways, but we see that all these people we see that this was controlled the narrative and that this was being said. And they kept saying, look, I'm sorry, we were talking about the House Intel investigations and the Senate investigations. And both of them came up that there wasn't a crime of collusion or people in Trump's administration conspiring with Russians. Those 2 investigations are done, by the way. They have concluded. And people, the Democrats all told us in the media mouthpieces and people like Schiff, don't worry, Mueller's got the goods. Clearly there was collusion. People in Trump's life, Don Jr. and Kushner, they're going to be let out in handcuffs. Mueller's got the goods. And then in the past couple weeks when it's become obvious that it was wrapping up and Mueller didn't have the goods, now the narrative, and even today, what you see the narrative's like, well, yeah, but we got this new House investigation. That'll have the goods. And the Southern District of New York, that'll have the goods. That's kind of the absurdity we're seeing. And, I should go and talk to, let me go over here. So this is a website. Most of you are probably from this. This is above top secret. I was running for office. I think that maybe people would think, oh, this guy's on a conspiracy theory website. He's running for Congress. Yeah, I am. I don't care. It's the truth. And most of the time I'm just talking about politics on here. I'm not ashamed of anything I've ever said. But let's go through and see some of the stuff that I'm talking about that you see on these threads. So obviously there's a lot of people agreeing that there's a problem. But then we also have some people that are talking like this isn't a big deal. So let's, for example, take And I'm not, I just want to say, this goes without saying with everything I do, but please don't, I'm not going to release people's names. Don't ever insult or attack anybody just because I'm pointing out things that I think are weaknesses in their arguments. Don't do anything like that. I'm not trying to make fun of anyone. I'm just bringing up things as evidence of what I'm hearing. Because I think sites like Above Top Secret and other places in social media, it's your best chance to be able to talk to people, real people, even if we might disagree with them, even if we think they're trolls and things like that. It's a place where we're able to have a conversation, right? So let's go through here. Here's what one person's take is. It'll be damn interesting to see how all these connections to the Russian government lies, those connections, lies about having a deal tower in Moscow, lies about a Trump Tower meeting, Manafort giving polling data, etc., are characterized by Mueller, even if he even looked into everything, considering how narrow even the summary letter is, he might not have. Yeah, this is a good point. This is worth talking about, because what you end up seeing is you're having this narrative now, and I've seen this on the media, not just by this user, but where people are saying, well, one, how thorough was Mueller in looking into things? Well, you could see from the actual letter from Barr where he talks about how they spent thousands of man hours. They had exactly how big their team was. They had something like over 500 witnesses that they interviewed. They talked to foreign governments, etc. They were very thorough in their investigation. And it says, quote, that there was no one in Trump's organization or Trump himself that conspired with Russians to influence the 2016, with Russian government officials to influence the 2016 election. So despite this 3-year investigation, 2 years of which was under Mueller, had near limitless resources, that had tons of people working on it, including intelligence agencies that they had free reign over, basically limitless resources looking into this one issue. Did anyone in Trump's campaign collude with Russia? To the point where they're raiding lawyers' offices in the middle of the night, and they weren't able to find anything. And still people are going to say, yeah, but did they look at everything? And I've seen this over and over. And the implication is somehow that, oh, well, Trump was only looking at Mueller was only looking at one specific type of collusion with Russians, just like an official Russian government agent, but he wasn't looking at, over here or over there, or things like that. No, that's ridiculous. He was looking for Russian collusion. He didn't find any of it. Everyone said that Mueller was going to have the goods. He was going to do it. Now all of a sudden we get, well, he wasn't thorough enough. Ridiculous. Keep in mind, it's not just him. Mueller's looked at it. The Senate Intel Committee's looked at it. The House Intel Committee. So far we've had 3 investigations. None of them have been able to pick up any evidence of Russian collusion whatsoever. Now, like this person's also saying, and I've seen the media say as well, the implication is, yes, but Trump and his people have lied about all sorts of things. For example, the lies Cohen told about the Trump Tower meeting. Okay, well, one, if we're going to talk about the lies of Cohen, I'm sorry, not the Trump Tower meeting. The lies that Cohen told regarding Trump's effort to get a tower put in Russia. What these lies were basically there was plans that Trump had to put a tower in Russia. Cohen testified that these plans were done in January. In reality, they went on until March or something like that. Therefore, he lied. That's why he got charged with lying to Congress. Of course, the irony is, as we all know, that many people, including Comey, Brennan, Clapper, other people connected to the Hillary campaign, have lied to Congress before or lied to the FBI, and they haven't received any punishment because, as these investigations have showed, there's a blatant double standard. It's okay for anyone to not register as a foreign lobbyist or lie to Congress or lie to the FBI as long as they're not connected to Trump. If you're connected to Trump, then all of a sudden those laws are enforced against you. But, that's neither here nor there for right now what I'm talking about. So we have this claim, there were all these lies. Well, one, many people, why is it only that the lies connected to Trump's team somehow prove guilt that they had some kind of collusion with Russia? For example, here's some lies. Why don't you hear the same people say, and this was all throughout the media, right? They were saying things like this. Here's some lies. Remember when Hillary Clinton and the Clinton Foundation lied and failed to report donations that they received from Russian interests during the Uranium One scandal? That's confirmed. They were actually criticized and had to file paperwork retroactively because they did not properly disclose the donations that they received. Remember when Bill Clinton lied and didn't tell people that he went and talked to Vladimir Putin in person, and then 2 weeks during the Uranium One scandal, and then 2 weeks later actually got paid $500,000 by a state-owned Russian bank? Remember that? Oh, that didn't matter. Remember when the DNC and Hillary's team lied about being the ones that paid for the dossier that was sourced from an ex-British spy that sourced his information from Kremlin agents? They lied about that over a year, to the point where even 2 New York Times reporters had to come out and say that the Hillary Clinton camp lied about this. So where were all these people in the media then? Where are all these people you see like this poster on ATS? Were they saying, oh, geez, Hillary's team lied about that? And we have tons of other lies. Remember when they lied about saying that there were no classified emails, they were all just yoga? Remember when they lied about saying that the reason they deleted subpoenaed evidence was because they planned to do it beforehand and didn't realize that it had been subpoenaed? Remember when Mills and Abedin lied and said they didn't have any knowledge of Hillary's server before her tenure as Secretary of State? Remember when Hillary Clinton lied and said she thought the little C at the top of the papers, the documents, what meant alphabetical order and not classified? Yet where were all these media people then? Where were all these people saying, oh, if someone lied, that proves their guilt? No, it's different all of a sudden. So what were reasons? Let's talk about the lies specifically. One, a lot of these times the lies are more like fabrications. I get it. Like, there's many definitions of what a lie could be, and there's many different types of lie. People often say, you know, according to fact checkers, by the way, I've done videos on this. Apparently, you could just put the term fact checker in front of your name, and all of a sudden that gives you some bona fides that anyone will take what you say at word without researching what you're saying, which is garbage, because the fact checkers lie and are wrong all the time. But you hear this all the time. According to fact checkers, Donald Trump lies 27.3 times a day. He lies more than any human in history. Yeah, okay, he does some stupid stuff like he'll lie and say like, yeah, this is the biggest economic growth in history. It's huge. Okay, yeah, that's probably a lie. Oh, this is the biggest crowd that's ever happened. That's huge. The other crowd, my opponent's crowd only had 10 people. Yeah, okay, I guess those are lies. But they're just like exaggerating, braggadocious lies. I get it. Like, it's not the greatest thing to do that, but that's different than lying about things like, if you like your doctor, you can keep it. Or lies like getting into the Iraq war that caused deaths and things like that. Those are lies of a greater magnitude that affect the people way more than the type of lies they're talking about Trump. As far as, I don't know exactly what all the lies people were talking about. I already went through the Trump Tower in Russia lie that Cohen supposedly told. There were other lies. For example, they say like Jeff Sessions said he never met any Russians, but then it turned out he claims he forgot that he had this dinner where he talked to a Russian for like 10 minutes, but it was like a public dinner. That's considered a lie by them, that forced Sessions to recuse himself as Attorney General from the Mueller investigation and things like that. Why would they lie? Well, it's the same reason why would you hide your tax returns if you're Trump? It's because he knows that the media is 95% out to get him. They're just hashtag resistance. And so if he comes out and they're just like, your Russia's the worst, and there's this P-tape about you in Russia, and Russia, and Russia agent, and you Russian agent, or you Russian agent. And if Trump's like, okay, like in full disclosure, I was trying to do business with Russians. I was trying to do this. Yeah, I've talked to Russians before. He knows as soon as he says that, that's used as fodder against him. Just like he knows if he releases his tax returns and it shows he did business in Russia, that's then spun by these liars in the mainstream media and by the establishment Democratic politicians to say, aha, Trump once did business in Russia. That proves it. Russian collusion. That proves it. So is it a good thing that maybe Trump or people connected to him lied about their connections with Russians? No, that's not a good thing. But is that an admission of guilt? No, not at all. Is that a reason for the to wiretap people connected to Trump? Things like that? No, not at all. There are other explanations why someone could stretch the truth or hide things or lie other than, oh, they're guilty of colluding with Russians to try to overthrow the United States government and steal an election. Such as, we know that the media that's colluding with the Democratic Party to try to overthrow a duly elected president will use anything they can with the sentence Trump and Russia in it to smear him as somehow an agent of Russia. So maybe it's best for them to try to keep that information under wraps. Again, am I saying it was worth lying about? No. But, oh, thanks, Lisa. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I'll try to get to... sometimes I get distracted reading the comments. But yeah, so that's what I feel about the lies when people say that. Again, it's one-sided. Anytime the other side lies or the Democrats lie or something, these very same people that are saying, well, Trump's team lied, so it proves something. They ignore that. They ignore Hillary's lies and all of that. That doesn't prove anything to them. And they ignore the fact that, the most salient point is, even that they did lie, even if you could say that, oftentimes, or if we ignore the fact that are these specific things lies, Mueller's investigation showed there was no collusion. So what do the lies matter at this point? Like, I guess you're saying because Cohen lied about the time frame of when the Trump-Russia tower was going to be built, that supersedes Mueller's actual investigation? It's absurd. All right, let's get to number 2 here. Later, number 1, in a footnote, in assessing potential conspiracy charges, the special counsel also considered whether members of the Trump campaign coordinated with Russian election interference activities. Special counsel defined coordination as an agreement, tacit or expressly, between the Trump campaign and Russian government on election interference. Seems like some wiggle room for people not to conspire illegally, but to do stuff not 100% in the up and up. Ridiculous. It talks specifically about expressly or tacitly. This means that they, and it even says in the Barr letter that actually what was going on was, actually what was going on was that there were several times where Russians did reach out to people connected to Trump's campaign, and they basically refused to expressly or tacitly conspire with those Russians to try to do something illegal to affect the election. So now trying to claim there's wiggle room, I mean, this is absolute insanity. But this is the kind of stuff you're seeing. Well, the same people that were telling us, not just random people here. That's Bill Hicks. Yeah, comedian Bill Hicks in the picture. That's my avatar for Above Top Secret. But the same people that talked about how, the Mueller investigation, just wait for it, that'll be the end-all be-all, are now saying, the Mueller investigation wasn't thorough enough. I mean, they might as well just come out and tell you, this investigation wasn't going to be thorough enough unless it lasted for 40 years until Trump's dead, and then somehow could be paired off on every Republican that comes after Trump. That's the only way it would have been thorough enough, unless we literally raided every single person's house in the middle of the night that's ever met Donald Trump. It wouldn't be thorough enough. Well, there's some wiggle room there. It's just ridiculous. Let's go with number 3. Well, the Seth Rich story is dead today. Barr says the material was hacked by Russians. No, Barr didn't say that. Barr said that the Mueller investigation said that it was hacked by Russians. And just like, this is another reason that I personally want to see all of the information made public. Not just this, right? I get all of the Democrats are saying, we need the Mueller report released. We need the Mueller report. We need transparency. My reaction, and you saw my video that I did about the hypocrisy of Democrats saying transparency now, but we're against transparency with things like the FISA warrant, is they should do their best to release this Mueller report as much as possible unredacted, and then at the same time announce that they're going to be releasing all these FBI documents as well, and say, yes, we've been moved by the Democrats' calls for transparency. Surely they'll be transparent with these other documents now as well, and then watch them say, no, we only want transparency with certain things. That's what Trump should do. But when it comes to this idea, the Seth Rich, what this is talking about is specifically the idea that, this somehow puts to bed the idea that Russians, it wasn't the Russians that hacked the DNC computers. Let's see the evidence. Here's what I do know. I know that the FBI never physically looked at the servers from the DNC that were supposedly hacked. And we can get into that. I've done videos about this. But consider this. The Democrats and the FBI have told us for 3 years now that this was an attack on the country. It was basically like war, an act of warfare, that it's one of the biggest political things that have occurred in our country in the history of the country. And so with a case so extreme, with so much on the line, you would think that both the FBI would say, we want to get our hands on the physical evidence as much as possible, the most crucial piece of physical evidence. And you think the Democrats would say, yes, please, come get this most crucial piece of physical evidence. But instead, the exact opposite happened. The FBI requested to get access to the physical server. The Democrats said, no, we don't want you having access to the physical server. And the FBI capitulated and said, that's cool. And so instead, the servers were allowed to be copied by an FBI-paid firm called CrowdStrike, who then copied the servers and gave them to the FBI, who did their analysis. CrowdStrike, by the way, who was the ones who first said that it was Russia that did the hack, also then went on to right after that say that Russians hacked a Ukrainian system, to which the Ukrainian government came out and said, no, you're wrong, CrowdStrike. But hey, we just got to take their word this time when it comes to the Russians hacking the DNC. Now, maybe Mueller does have more evidence that proves that the Russians hacked. I'd be interested to see it. But this claim that somehow puts it to bed, it's not Barr saying that, and Barr probably would say that anyways, but I haven't seen any of it. Number 4, quote, while this report does not conclude that the president committed a crime, it also does not exonerate him. This is a line Mr. Barr in front of many committees, especially when he said no obstruction afterwards. Yeah, let's talk about that. So here's the absurd claim. It doesn't exonerate him, right? This is on obstruction. 1, this ignored, that's all you hear the media talking about today. They're just talking about the idea that, it doesn't exonerate. Trump says he's exonerated. He's not exonerated. Maybe he did commit obstruction. Well, this is going to be a matter. We need more investigations. And, just because, of course, Barr, who was appointed by Trump, said that there's no reason to pursue a criminal case. Of course, he said that there's not enough evidence. So let's go through this. 1, they're ignoring the collusion thing. which is by far the biggest part of the story. Totally exonerated. There was no Russia collusion. Totally ignored. The media, I watched Don Lemon, I watched other people on CNN to see, kind of just tune into what they were saying. I read people from New York Times, Washington Post, other pundits that are saying, or supposed journalists, but we know the truth, saying things like, oh, no. Yeah, no collusion, whatever. But let's talk about this obstruction of justice. That's the real story. It doesn't exonerate him. It didn't say they could hold him criminally accountable, but doesn't exonerate. That probably shows that there was really shady stuff going on. They just didn't have enough to pass reasonable doubt. You ignore the entire story. The media just wants to pretend like they haven't for 3 years been telling us Russia collusion, Russia collusion, Russia collusion. No mea culpas. No, I'm sorry. Just boop, just like that, bounce on to the next thing. Check my video out I did. I think the title of the video is Liberal Journalist Talks About How Russia Narrative Destroyed Their Credibility. It's from Matt Taibbi, formerly of the Rolling Stone, and I think he now works with another liberal journalist named Glenn Greenwald, both of whom have been discussing how the Russia collusion investigation and the narrative was a joke from the get-go. And these are people that hate Trump, by the way. But check it out to just see how much of a joke the media was. So tonight, do they come out and do they say, oh, our bad, we did something wrong? No, instead it's the exact opposite. We're just going to ignore it and move on, just like they always did, just like they did with Covington, with the Smollett case. This is their MO. Just spread lies. Don't be journalists. Just be #resistance. And then when it turns out that you lied, oh, okay, we're moving on to the next thing. So don't let them get away with that. That's ridiculous. Now, the second thing, let's talk more specifically about the obstruction right now. Second thing, right, let's talk, okay, Lisa, yeah, we're talking about, I did a video on this as well. If we're going to be talking about the idea of collusion, why aren't we investigating, for example, Hillary Clinton and her collusion, and that she hired a foreign spy to then get information from the Kremlin to get dirt on Trump? How is that not collusion as well? But an even better example of that is how people connected to the DNC, and the DNC knew this, went to the Ukraine, colluded with the members of the Ukraine that was specific intent was to help Hillary Clinton win the 2016 election. So much so that, one, the DNC admitted, even though they didn't sanction that activity, that they were aware of it. Second, the DNC used that information because that's what resulted in Trump having to fire Manafort. And third, the Ukraine's already charged 2 people with this, one of which I believe has been indicted in their country for illegally trying to help, and illegally based on their laws, the Ukrainian laws, of spreading information to try to help Hillary Clinton win the election. But no investigation into that collusion, right? And I did an entire video on this. And again, maybe I could bring that up later. It depends on how long I'm doing this. Like I put a thread on it above Top Secret and other places where I talk. No, it's just totally ignored. It's not just the media that does this. The people that consume this media, they learn their tactics and their behavior from the media. So they'll just spew lies. And then when you show that they're lies, or when you show, well, wait a minute, here's something horribly corrupt that your side did, they literally just ignore it. Just act like it's not there. This happens over and over and over. And I'll talk about that here at the end here about Obama. My contention is everyone who's focusing on Hillary Clinton's wrong. It's actually Obama who's the person that needs investigated. Hillary Clinton, being the beneficiary of the Obama intel agencies going after Trump, that's not necessarily Hillary's fault. Look, if she committed crimes, she should be held accountable. But the real person that was at the head of the helm when all this corruption was going on was Barack Obama. And that's who should be investigated, him and his intel agencies, more so than Hillary. Anyways, so let's move on from the Ukrainian collusion. Let's talk about the obstruction specifically. So now what the Democrats will have us believe, and it's correctly pointed out, Barr says, part of Barr's influence into not charging for corruption was the fact that there was no underlying crime for Trump to want to cover up. So what was he obstructing? Right? In order for Trump to be obstructing justice, you would assume then, like, let's say there's an investigation into me, and it's about whether did I steal all the candy bars in the house or something. If I'm trying to stymie that investigation and obstruct that investigation, it probably means I'm guilty. If I didn't take the candy bars, then what am I obstructing? And people say, but Trump was engaged in all sorts of... He acted guilty. Yeah, because the media, 95% of them are going after him nonstop. He continually goes to James Comey and is like, look, man, I get it. Comey even admitted. Trump said, if anyone colluded with Russia and my team, go after him. Comey admitted that in testimony. He just constantly kept being like, am I under investigation? Comey's like, no, you're not under investigation. Can you please tell the American people that? Because the media every day is out there saying Trump's guilty, Trump's guilty, he's a Russian agent, he's a Russian agent, he's a Russian agent. This probably really hurt the Republicans in the 2018 election, which I'm sure was the point in the first place from all these media people to do it. So he's constantly out there saying, and finally he got tired of Comey doing this, telling him one thing in private and then going out and saying different things in public, and so he fired him. And he did other things, like he tweets a lot, he's got a big mouth. But it's because he's upset because he's getting such a raw deal. That's not obstruction of justice. He had nothing to obstruct for. Next, if he obstructed justice, then how come the investigations continued? Did he stymie Mueller in any way? No. In fact, Comey even admitted, after he was let go, the investigation actually picked up steam because then a special counsel got appointed. So there was no obstruction. The investigation never slowed down. There was never an underlying crime that Trump was guilty of. Now next, all of the actions that supposedly Trump took that was constituted as possible obstruction, such as firing James Comey, were things that he's legally allowed to do. Not only that, but the firing of Comey was called for by the Democrats for months before that. So the idea that this somehow constitutes obstruction is absurd. Then you have the fact that it's not a prosecution's job or someone like Bob Mueller's job to exonerate people. For example, if I'm accused of breaking into a house and the prosecution looks at me and says, we find no evidence that Rob broke into the house, that's not an exoneration of me. That just says they couldn't prove I committed a crime. Prosecutors aren't in the business of then saying, oh, and now we're going to go out and do a PR campaign to show that not only do we not have evidence that you committed a crime, but we're going to actively go out and do all this research on why you're a great person and you would never commit a crime and we have, try to exonerate me. That's not the point of the prosecution. So I don't get what of course he didn't, but it's funny, right? Look at the parallels to this, and I saw Alan Dershowitz talking about this on Fox. Look at the parallels to what Mueller's doing here, to what Comey did with the Hillary investigation, where he comes out. Now, we haven't seen exactly what Mueller said, but I'm guessing this is what it's going to be based on the language that Barr said. They're going to take like a situation like firing James Comey, and they're going to say, well, here's the reasons we thought it could have been obstruction, and here's the reasons that maybe show that it wasn't obstruction. And they're going to go through each thing on a case-by-case basis like that. And it seems like Mueller took the tack, look, I'm just not going to get involved with this. I'm going to lay out the evidence and then leave the Attorney General decide. It's very similar to what Comey did, where he came out and said, here's a bunch of things that Hillary did, but we're not going to recommend a prosecution. So in that sense, it's similar. There was outrage over Comey did that. Even me, I thought the way he handled himself was terrible there. So why wouldn't there be similar outrage here with Mueller? But, of course, he'll get a pass for whatever reason. And they'll just say, yeah, this somehow means. All the Democrats had said, Comey outlined quite clearly exactly why Hillary broke the law. He added things like intent and things of that nature that wasn't in the language of the law in order to exonerate her. Yet all the Democrats told her, there was no charge. He didn't recommend charges. That's it. That's the end-all be-all. No charges recommended. That's all that matters. Yet now they're taking the exact opposite take with Mueller, right? It's not just, no charges recommended. Therefore, I guess there wasn't. They're saying, well, he didn't specifically say he was exonerated. Well, neither did Comey say that Hillary is exonerated. He just said they didn't recommend charges because no reasonable prosecutor would take it. That's not an exoneration. In fact, he lambasted her for her decisions and her recklessness. He said that it was extremely careless as opposed to negligent because he changed his language. And then left us parse that out. That wasn't an exoneration. So why the double standard here? Now, yes, and you're absolutely right. Let's, real quick, remember, never forget, Rosenstein's conflict of interest here is insane. Rosenstein actually wrote the memo that got James Comey fired. And then 7 days later, after that, Rosenstein says, geez, I think there's a need for a special counsel to look into things like obstruction of justice because Comey got fired. And so then he's the one who's in charge of Mueller and his investigation, seeing as how the AG Sessions at the time was recused. How does that make sense whatsoever? There needs to be an investigation as what was going on with Rosenstein there. So if you're someone that works under you says, hey, I think you should fire this guy. Here's my list of reasons why you should fire this guy. And you're a supervisor and you're like, oh, okay, you're fired, guy. Then that person that recommended it says, boy, that was shady that you fired him. I better appoint an investigator as to why you fired him. What sense does that make whatsoever? So this idea of obstruction is ridiculous. Now, here's another thing that I want to talk specifically about that I haven't heard people talk about, and I will be doing an actual video on this tomorrow, a full video just on this idea. So we have the idea that somehow now that you'll see a bunch of these people saying, well, what happened is, you know, Trump's guy Barr, Trump's Attorney General Barr, he's the one who made the final decision. That's disgusting. He couldn't do this legitimately. Oh, here we go. It's just Trump's man. This is a cover-up. We need more investigations. That's the big line that's coming out now. Mueller didn't specifically exonerate Trump. He left it up to AG Barr. And AG Barr must be Trump's man. So he's just working with Trump to cover up the fact that he knows Trump actually committed obstruction. One, that's absurd, because if there was evidence that he actually committed obstruction, then Mueller would have recommended charges. Mueller had no incentive to not recommend charges. He'd been going after Trump gung-ho. He knew that he would be a hero if he was able to recommend charges. And the problem with all special counsels is they always want to get their man no matter what. So he had every incentive whatsoever to go after Trump. There's no evidence. Are we now going to hear that somehow Bob Mueller is secretly under Trump's purvey as well? Ridiculous. Second, Barr says that he worked in conjunction with Mueller and with Rod Rosenstein. Rosenstein, who hated Trump so much that supposedly he wore a wire to try to get Trump impeached, saying that get staff members invoke the amendment that said that he wasn't capable to hold office. Rosenstein, who's been a thorn in Trump's side for years now. Now we're to believe all of a sudden, that was all a sham. Actually, he's in Trump's pocket. Ridiculous. But the third most important thing that's worth talking about here is how many times did we see Barack Obama's attorney generals in the Department of Justice engage in fraudulent, corrupt activities where they were able to then be the ultimate decider on crimes that they were looking in of people connected to Obama. Let's just take the best example, Hillary Clinton. Now, I did a video just a couple weeks ago, maybe a week and a half ago, right, that talked about this. Remember, Loretta Lynch, who was the Attorney General, the Department of Justice is ultimately going to decide whether or not to charge Hillary Clinton with crimes having her server at home. The first thing that happens is Obama immediately comes out before any investigation and says, no, there wasn't any crime committed by Hillary Clinton. None whatsoever. Okay, well, somehow that's not obstruction of justice. But send his Department of Justice that works directly under him, which Eric Holder said it was their job to be Obama's wingman. So that shows you how independent they were. And they know that if Hillary Clinton gets indicted or charged for some of this, it's going to severely hamper her chances to win the presidency. And their most hated opponent, Donald Trump, would then win the presidency. That's the Department of Justice that was ultimately going to make the choice. Yet no Democrat said, this is ridiculous. Obama's Department of Justice is going to be the ones that ultimately decide whether or not Hillary Clinton is charged. Ridiculous. No one said that. So it was just going to go off without a hitch. And then something happened. Loretta Lynch ends up meeting with Bill Clinton on a tarmac. So the spouse of the person that Loretta Lynch is ultimately going to decide to charge or not meets with her a secret in a tarmac. The only reason we ever found out about this is because a local reporter that's not a mainstream media person that's in the loop that knows he's supposed to be just a mouthpiece for the intel agencies in the Democratic Party actually stumbled onto this meeting and reported on it. So then Lynch had to say, no, we weren't talking. It was a secret meeting with Bill Clinton, but we weren't talking about anything related to the case. We were just talking about her family. But did she recuse herself as a result of this? No. Now, we've already seen the double standards, right, of how Jeff Sessions had to recuse himself, and Whitaker, the Dems wanted him to recuse himself, and Barr should have to recuse himself. Anyone who's ever talked to a Russian should have had to recuse himself from anything. The only thing that was acceptable was having someone like Mueller that was handpicked by James Comey, the person that Comey wanted, or handpicked by Rosenstein, and that's the exact person that Comey wanted. Mueller, whose then team was a bunch of people that were stacked with Democrats and actually some lawyers that formerly worked with people connected to Hillary Clinton, defended people in the Clinton Foundation. That was the only thing that was acceptable. Anyways, I'm rambling a little here, but the point is that these same people that shouted everyone must recuse themselves that had any connection to Trump or ever met a Russian had no problem with Loretta Lynch not recusing herself officially when she met Bill Clinton on a tarmac. And the reason they said that Lynch didn't have to recuse herself was, well, Lynch came out and said whatever the FBI recommends, she'll go through with. And that was the lie that was peddled. We had to swallow that crap. Many of us said, this is garbage, but fine, that's what they said. And so it was going to be up to James Comey and the FBI. And they were going to be, if they recommended charges, Then Lynch said, okay, then we'll file charges. If they recommended no charges, then Lynch said, we'll listen to the FBI. That's what she said, right? Well, it just came out, and I did a video like a week and a half on this, that actually that's not what happened. First, we knew for a while now that the head counselor and prosecutor at the FBI, James Baker, said that he recommended charging Hillary Clinton for her server. And he had arguments with Comey about it. So we already knew that. But now we know from Lisa Page's testimony that actually there were many people inside the FBI that recommended charging Hillary Clinton for her server. But they were told by people at Loretta Lynch's Department of Justice not to recommend charges because the Department of Justice wouldn't go through with those charges anyways. Do you understand what that means? Loretta Lynch didn't recuse herself and lied and said whatever the FBI recommended she'd go through with. But instead, she still, and her Department of Justice, still made the final decision. So Obama, who already said she wasn't guilty, had his agents that were directly under him, that were on his staff, that were his wingmen, were the ones that ultimately made the decision not to charge Hillary Clinton. Loretta Lynch, who met with the accused, the person being investigated spouse on a tarmac in secret, was the person who ultimately had the final say. And she lied to us for over a year saying, no, I'll listen to whatever the FBI says. That was a lie. Now, we know that happened. Did you hear the mainstream media report on this story a lot? This just came out like 2 weeks ago. Did you hear Don Lemon? Did you hear anyone at the New York Times, Washington Post, Anderson Cooper, Rachel Maddow? Hear any of them talk about how this was absurd? That couldn't have been a situation, that there was obviously bias involved in that situation? No, you didn't hear a peep about that, did you? Now, fast forward to today. So they had no problem with that situation where we could see the bias. Did Barr meet with anyone connected with Trump on a tarmac? Was he meeting with Melania on a tarmac in secret? Did he do anything else shady like Loretta Lynch did? No. But they had no problem. The same people that had no problem with Lynch not recusing herself and the fact that we found out that she lied and that actually the FBI did recommend charges and they didn't go through. Now, that would be like this. Imagine that Barr was meeting in secret with Trump's spouse. Imagine that, all this shady stuff was going on. And then Mueller came out and goes to Barr and goes, okay, I'm recommending that you charge Donald Trump with obstruction of justice. And Barr just says, Barr has people in his DOJ go to Mueller and say, no, don't say that because we're not going to. No matter what, we're not going to charge them. So you might as well just change your mind. Can you imagine the outrage, the screaming? We already see the outrage from all these talking heads now, and nothing like that happened. So when the Democrats do it, when it was Obama's DOJ, there was never a question. Yeah, of course they could be independent. But when it's Trump's DOJ, now all of a sudden it's a huge scandal. It proves corruption. You have Schiff, you have Nadler out there saying, this is garbage. This is clearly obstruction of justice. We need more investigations. We need impeachment proceedings. Something needs to be done. This is corruption of the highest order. Absolute garbage. We know that because they had the exact opposite reaction when there was far more bias and corruption going on with Obama's DOJ not charging Hillary Clinton. So I'm going to be doing a full video on that tomorrow, but that's all of the reasons that this obstruction narrative is absolute garbage. And it's all designed to do one thing. It's take away from the culpability that the media had and the fact that this report, what it really did was prove that they are liars, that they are not journalists, that they've been had, that they fed all of us a lie for over 3 years. They constantly lied to us. We now know definitively that there was no Russia collusion with people connected to the Trump campaign. Now, people will say, oh, so now you're saying somehow that Mueller's this super trusted guy, that we have to trust Mueller, he's a great guy. No, this is a mistake people often make. Let's say I cite a report, right, and I say, CNN comes out with an article and says, yeah, Trump actually, the numbers were higher than thought. Trump actually added $180,000, under Trump's administration, 180,000 jobs were added last month. And so I respond to someone and I say, look, even CNN is saying that Trump's administration added 180,000 jobs last month. Someone will inevitably say to me, oh, using CNN? I thought CNN was a bunch of liars. I thought you didn't trust CNN. Here you are using them. No, you don't understand. One, just because there's an organization like CNN that's clearly biased, that doesn't mean that raw numbers and things like that are wrong. You'll never see me on places like Above Top Secret or elsewhere. You never see me just flat out say, oh, this is from CNN, I won't listen to it. If it's the crux of the story is an anonymous source CNN setting, I might say, oh, okay, let's take that with a grain of salt, though I say that with any source. But I don't just dismiss something outright because of the source. I never do. But second and most importantly, the point is that you're showing even a site or even a news agency, quote unquote news agency, that's so against Trump is saying that. You know, it would be like, let's say, you know, I'm a fan of sports. Let's say, you know, you're watching baseball. I like the Pittsburgh Pirates. They're playing the Philadelphia Phillies. Or no, let's say they're playing the Chicago Cubs because I know that team better, you know. And there's a play at the plate and the Pirates get, you know, the Cubs slides into home plate. Whoever the Cub, Rizzo slides into home plate. The ump calls him safe. And the Pirates manager, Clint Hurdle's like, that's ridiculous. He was out. And then the Cubs manager after the game goes, yeah, I think he was out too. You would say, see, even the Cubs manager thought he was out. That's the type of thing. It's the same way when you say, see, even CNN is saying this good thing about Trump. That's how I feel about Mueller. I feel that Mueller's actions have showed that he was geared up to do anything possible to take Trump down. There are several reasons that I believe this. Number one, who did he put on his team? Almost all exclusively career Democrats, many people which have expressly worked with, as lawyers, for people connected to Hillary Clinton or the Clinton Foundation itself. That to me showed incredibly bad judgment and possible corruption. But that in its alone I wouldn't say guaranteed corruption. That was just the first thing. Number two, because of the fact that he charged people connected to Trump with crimes that he refused to charge people connected to Hillary with. So, for example, he charged Michael Cohen with lying to Congress, but he let people like Brennan and Comey and Clapper and others off. Maybe he wouldn't have roll over Clapper, but certainly Comey, he let him get away with lying to Congress and other people. He charged Flynn with lying to the FBI. Keep in mind, the FBI agents that interviewed Flynn initially walked away from that saying that they didn't think that he committed a crime by intentionally lying to them. Mueller comes in and disagrees and charges Flynn. The lawyers in Manafort's case gives you a good reason why that happened. Or not the lawyer, the judge in the Manafort case gives you a good reason why that happened, because he said that none of this was about arresting people like Manafort or Flynn. It was about doing what they could to get them to flip on Donald Trump. So Mueller, being a scumbag, basically, is charging Flynn with lying to the FBI, even though the FBI agents initially didn't think that they were intentional lies. Okay, you say. I've said the whole time, if someone committed a crime, they should be held accountable. The only thing is, you want that standard applied to everyone. So at the same time, Mueller, who in his purview in investigating all things connected to Russia investigation, would have been able to clearly see that actually Mills and Abedin lied to the FBI involving the Hillary Clinton investigation. In fact, FBI agents even said they thought Hillary Clinton's claim that the C on the top of documents meant ABC, alphabetical order, as opposed to classified, quote, define credulity. We see that in text messages that were released by FBI agents. In other words, they thought Hillary Clinton was lying. But Mueller decides, along with the FBI, not to charge any of those people with lying, only to charge the people connected to Trump with lying. And then the biggest thing, if you read the indictment of Paul Manafort, he was indicted for FARA violations. This is basically failing to register as a foreign lobbyist. This is a crime that occurs all the time in Washington, which is basically we have all these garbage foreign influencers that are lobbying to, that are using Americans as lobbyists to get connections to our politicians. And then our politicians make decisions that maybe are more beneficial to foreign countries than their own constituents. Everybody knows this happens in Washington all the time and no one's charged for it. Well, they decide to finally charge Manafort for it. Okay, no problem. He committed a crime. Fine. Hold him accountable. All I ask is you apply that equally. If you look at the actual indictment of Manafort, it says specifically that he worked with Group A and Group B. Group A was Mercury LLC, a Republican group that's a lobbyist. Group B was the Podesta Group, founded by Hillary Clinton's campaign manager, John Podesta, and still operated as the chief person in it was Podesta's brother, who lobbied or who raised money for Hillary. They did this while Hillary was Secretary of State. They were all lobbying together for foreign interests without registering. Mueller charges Manafort with the crime, and he allows the Podesta Group and Mercury LLC to not be charged with the crime and instead of retroactively file paperwork. That selective application of the law showed to me that Mueller was either incompetent or corrupt, most likely corrupt. And then what sealed the deal for me was the third thing, which I'm not going to get into it. I've talked about it at length, but was the fact when Strzok and Page, who were the two FBI lovers that were saying they could smell Trump supporters at Walmart, they needed an insurance policy against Trump. When they went to work for Mueller in the Mueller investigation, they were given new phones, iPhones. The Inspector General Horowitz eventually comes to Mueller after a couple months and says, hey, listen, look at these text messages from when these people were at the FBI. This seems really bad. I'm investigating this. And Mueller said, Mueller agreed it was bad, so he let them go. So Mueller knew that these text messages were bad enough to not have these people on his team. And he knew that the IG was looking at text messages. Yet instead of preserving these phones, so the Inspector General, someone who's supposed to be looking at oversight to make sure that all these investigations were on the up and up, he knew that the Inspector General would eventually want to see these phones. Instead of allowing him to have access to them, he actually had his team wipe those phones clean. And there wasn't any backup whatsoever of these phones. So now the Inspector General was never able to see what Strzok and Page were texting when they were working as the Mueller team, or for the Mueller team. That shows incredible incompetence or corruption. And so for those three things, I still don't think Mueller's a guy that's on the up and up. I think he wanted to do everything possible to take Trump down. And so even him, who had every incentive to do that, and even Rosenstein, who it's clear, the claims are saying he wanted Trump out of there. He was threatening to wear a wiretap, supposedly, says McCabe. But it's clear that there's a lot of animosity between Rosenstein and Trump. Even him, they couldn't find the goods. They couldn't find any evidence of Russia collusion. So that's when I'm talking about that, because a lot of people are saying, now you want to praise Mueller. No, I don't. So, let's talk about, so what do we have now as the indictments from Mueller? What actually came out? Because that's another thing that you'll hear them talk about. Well, we have supposedly the Russians that hacked the DNC. If that's true, if the Russians did that, that's a big deal. Those are people that should be charged. But let's be honest, they're never going to be, what's the word I'm looking for? They're never going to be sent to America to be tried. That's not going to happen. Then you had these supposed Russian troll farms. And the idea was they spent $15,000 on Facebook ads trying to swing the election. Now remember, we are led to believe that's a old story. That's laughable on face value. Somehow that $15,000 was more well spent than the billions of dollars that Hillary spent in the election. Ridiculous. If that's the case, then every person who's in advertising is doing it wrong. Instead of spending money like on a Super Bowl commercial or with campaign ads or things like that on network television, you should really just be putting a couple $1,000s in ads on Facebook. We know that's a lie. We know it's wrong. But anyways, okay, sure. Those people were indicted. Oh, and by the way, never mind that we now have admissions from people connected to the Democratic Party, Democratic agents that were actually doing the exact same tactics that the Russians were doing, going so far as to pretend to be Russian bots in the special election in Alabama, saying in their own memos that they were purposely mimicking the tactics that the Russians that were arrested or that were indicted or charged, as trolls that affected the election, mimicking their tactics, yet no investigation of them. In fact, not only no investigation, that group, I forget the name of them, but if you go read the article by Matt Taibbi that's on the video, again, that I put up that says liberal journalist talks about how the Russian narrative destroys media credibility, he talks specifically at length about how that group's still being used by the mainstream media to say people like Tulsi Gabbard are connected to Russia. So far we got some Russians indicted, okay, and then who were the Americans indicted? The people connected to Trump. Flynn, what was his crime? Lying to the FBI about perfectly legal stuff. Okay. Cohen, what was his crime? Well, one, he lied to Congress, supposedly, which, by the way, in Cohen's second testimony, there's good evidence, again, where he came out and was like, Trump's the worst, Trump's the worst, Trump's the worst. There's good evidence he lied again there. Yet there's no interest from the Democrats to prosecute him for those lies, because those lies were designed to make Trump look bad. So those lies are okay to Congress. It's just, but if you lie and you mess up your dates a little, 3 months, that's considered a lie, and that might help Donald Trump. Well, then you're looking at the book. You're looking at 2 years in prison. The other crime that Cohen supposedly convicted of, he pled guilty to illegal influence of campaign finance laws by paying off an extortionist, Stormy Daniels. You see, because if any Democratic candidate had extortionists that came and said, I'm going to ruin your life and I'm going to go public with our affair if you don't give me money, the media and all the Democrats would say that's an extortionist and you do whatever you can to get rid of that person. We don't judge the victims of extortionists. But because it was Trump, now all of a sudden, oh, Stormy Daniels is a hero and we have to go after Trump. That's it. And by the way, that's the big case that the Southern District of New York's looking in. Campaign finance violations, which, oh, by the way, the Obama administration was guilty of and had to settle with a fine. But I'm sure with Trump, it'll be a much bigger deal than it was with the Obama administration. Granted, the crimes are a little different, but both campaign finance violations. Right? But so that's what you had Cohen. Oh, by the way, a lot of legal experts, and my research into it as well, granted, I admit to being biased and not a legal expert, shows that in order for this to be a campaign finance violation, the payment would have had to have been exclusively for the purpose of helping the campaign. Well, we could see that Trump's paid off women before, so it turns out that he would be willing to pay off women even if he wasn't running for the campaign, which means it's not an exclusive campaign expenditure. If that does constitute a law breaking the law, then anytime someone got their hair cut that was running for office, they also could be found guilty of campaign finance violations if they didn't report it because, well, you got a haircut to help your chances to win the election. It's absurd. But clearly Cohen had reason to plead guilty to that because the entire idea for Mueller was they needed to get crimes connected to Trump. So Cohen, all these people just getting charged with process crimes, like lying about things that weren't crimes, that doesn't connect to Trump. But they could go to Cohen and say, look, plead guilty to this other crime. And then we could connect that to Trump. Oh, campaign finance violation on behalf of Trump. There's something we could connect to Trump. Now let's get the Southern District of New York up on this investigation. And then we'll lower the time we would have gave you for the other crime that had nothing to do with Trump. And again, that's what was said in the next person that was prosecuted, Manafort. Manafort's judge said, this is not about punishing people like Manafort. It's about trying to get Trump. We know that. Manafort, it was a bunch of tax-related things. Things like that, things that he was doing with taxis, financial things that had nothing to do with Trump, and failing to register as a foreign lobbyist. That's the stuff he was charged for. And then he was also got additional punishment for improper communications when he was supposed to not be able to be communicating with people. That's it. No one charged. They say, oh, but this bore fruit. The only Americans that were charged as a result of the investigation occurring. In other words, the idea of having an investigation is you're like, there are crimes out there, and so we need to investigate those crimes. Well, it turned out that those crimes that were being investigated, which was the idea of Russian collusion, did not exist. That crime was not there. The only crimes that Americans were charged for as a result of the Mueller investigation were only occurring after the investigation started. And again, I'll say finally, like, you can think, I understand lying to the FBI and things like that are the problem. I get it. But it's easier than you think to get trapped by them. If you're getting grilled over and over again and people are saying, like, we want every email that you sent during the election. We want all this information, all that. Who did you call? What time did you call him? What date was it? Who did you meet? Did you ever meet a Russian? Etc. Oh, and I forgot Papadopoulos was charged as well. He was charged with also lying. That was it. You think, what, he served 10 days in jail or something? That's it. But if you're constantly under that pressure, there's a chance you slip up at some point. And then, therefore, technically, you lied to the FBI. And you could be charged. Again, look at the gross double standard of the application. We know that Mills and Aberdeen and Hillary Clinton lied to the FBI. No charges whatsoever. In fact, they're given immunity. But if you lie about something and you're connected to Trump, then they throw the book at you and they turn the screws in hopes that you'll eventually turn on Trump. That was the plan from the outset. Now, you had people like me and other people that have bigger voices than me that were saying from the beginning of this investigation, if Trump committed any crimes or people connected to him, hold them accountable. But it is clear that there is no evidence for Russia collusion. Starting this investigation, let's talk about what started the Mueller investigation and the FBI investigation in general. Now, let me back up. Actually, let me get a drink. Are you happy today? Right? That's something. Oh, people are so happy. This is a great day. You know, Trump's been exonerated, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it's good that we finally see what many of us knew, that there was no evidence of collusion in the first place. And that it is good that that's came out in public. But it's also predictable that all the people that should be apologizing are instead doubling down. That was predictable. But to me, it's a small victory. It's not even really a victory. It's not about the specific characters and people. That's not what this is about to me. So, I'm not someone who's a cult of personality. I defend Trump. I like a lot of what Trump did. I also call Trump out when I think he does things that I don't agree with. That's the same with any politician. I always care about the country first. I care about the people of the country first. And I tend to gravitate towards politicians and people that I think are most similar or most exemplify the ideas that I have. But it's the ideas that are important to me. So if the act or if the person does something bad, I'm not just going to automatically defend every action they take. I think that's a mistake we make. We end up rooting for politicians instead of rooting for policies or the actions they're taking. And then when the politician does something that's anathema or it's against the actions we would normally want to see, then we end up saying, oh, it's okay because I like that person. So I'm not trying to do that. For me, this issue is never about the specific people. So that's why you haven't seen me be a big lock her up chanter of Hillary. That's why I was able to say if Trump did collude with Russians and proof of that came out, then yeah, he should be judged by that. I get it, right? Like that makes sense. I'm with that. To me, the issue was this, and I've said this a lot of times on this channel. Let's look at the possible crimes that are being investigated. One is the idea that we have someone who ended up winning the president, a candidate for president, and then who eventually won, that potentially worked with a foreign power to help them win the election. And then conceivably the implication would then make policy beneficial to that foreign power that's a rival of us for the help that they received. It's a big deal. I'm not going to deny that. That's something that would be worth charging. It would be bad to have foreign influencers, although we already know they do, but it would be bad to have foreign influencers affecting our elections and our governance system. That's absolutely true. However, that pales, and I literally mean pales in comparison, to the damage that could be done by the other potential crime, which is a sitting president weaponizing the most powerful intel agency in the history of the world to investigate, smear, go after, stymie, and stop any possible opponent from having political success, whether it be to help stop them get elected or, if elected, to continue to investigate and spy on them to the point where you hamper their ability to have good governance. That is the biggest threat to our country that we're facing right now. More than anything Russia could do, or China, or Israel, or the UK, or France, or Syria, or Turkey, whatever, insert country. If we're talking about the weaponizations of the intel community, if we're talking about the idea that unelected bureaucrats could act as kingmakers and decide who gets elected, and if they could overrule the American people's voice for who they vote for, if they vote for someone that the intel agency doesn't like, and that sitting presidents could use those agencies to spy, that is the biggest deal by a long shot. Remember, and that's why I've said repeatedly, this is the biggest political scandal in the history of this country. Look at how big of a deal Watergate was. What are we really talking about with Watergate? People connected to Nixon, 2 of them bumbling around in a hotel. Now imagine if Nixon, instead of having a couple bumblers in a hotel, he weaponized the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, I don't even know if the NSA was around then, but you get the picture, to spy on his opponent. The magnitude of that action is so far greater, it makes the Watergate scandal pale in comparison. That's what we're talking about potentially happened under Barack Obama. That is a far bigger deal. So when we hear all these people saying, well, transparency for the Mueller report, I agree with them. And the reason they say transparency is so important is because the stakes are so high. Because if Trump did collude with Russia, that's such a huge deal. Well, I make the same argument with the need for the release of all the documents of the FBI, such as the FISA warrant, all the text messages unredacted that they had going on, etc. Basically, all the evidence that they collected. It also needs to be transparent released because the stakes of that are even higher. Yet the people that talk about the stakes of Russia collusion and why that means we need transparency for everything make the exact opposite argument. In fact, they even tell you, if you look at the mainstream media, to even criticize the intel agencies is un-American and damages America. They're saying it again today. So that, to me, is the real crime. Now, and it's clear that we now know that things like the dossier that was paid opposition research from Hillary Clinton was used by Obama's intel agencies to go after and spy on Obama's biggest political rival at the time, Donald Trump. We know that. We now know that that dossier was a lie. It was paid research and it was a lie. So as I said in my other video, think of the precedent that this sets. Because the excuse for this was, this is why it's worth talking about this today. The excuse that was given was, look, okay, maybe using opposition research isn't the smartest move for the FBI to spy on a candidate for the opposition party, but the Mueller investigation will bear out that Carter Page is a spy. The Mueller investigation will bear out that there is Russia collusion. So even if it started under not the under some shaky circumstance, it'll all be worth it at the end because the stakes are so high. Okay, well, that didn't happen. So now the narrative changes. Well, of course they didn't know if he was a spy or not, if Carter Page was a spy or not. Of course they didn't know if the allegations in the dossier were true until they did an investigation. My contention was, yes, that's true. They should have sought verification before they got wiretaps to violate the constitutional rights of Americans. Especially when you're talking about those Americans working on a campaign for president. Especially when that information you're using was paid for by that campaign's opposition. The threshold for that should be incredibly high. Higher than even normal. The threshold for being able to violate a person's constitutional rights should be very high anyways for a FISA court, which it's not, and that's something terrible that needs to be looked into. But particularly when you're talking about one campaign paying for research against another campaign and then using that information to spy on that campaign, the threshold should be so immensely high that it would almost never be done. You should have almost 100% verification of that opposition research you're using. Instead, there was no verification, and now we find out that even after the near limitless resources and 2 years of a Mueller investigation, that the dossier still cannot be proven true. So, the precedent's now been set. People say, oh, and this is what people are saying now. Well, but the allegations were so serious that they had to be investigated. So, okay. Now what those people have said, all the people that cheered for this corruption, what they've effectively said is that now Trump could just pay for any research he wants. Let's just say, he could pay a foreign spy or former foreign spy to say, hey, yeah, I found evidence that all 20 of the Democrats that are running against you like to get peed on in China. And yeah, they're all working with China to steal the election. And oh, here's evidence over here, by the way, that China spies on us all the time. So yeah, that's true. We know that. Which that is true. We do know China spies on us all the time. So the implications are so huge, I guess we better send out the wiretaps, right? And of course, because these people are shameless, they'll say, no, it's different. If Trump would do it, he would be an authoritarian dictator. But when Obama did it, Obama's a really cool guy, man. So when he did it, he's a good guy. He won a Nobel Peace Prize. He's a cool guy. So when Obama did it, it was totally cool. Just like, if Bush drops bombs on people, I'm standing with all these liberals like in places like Iraq saying, yeah, this war's a sham. This is terrible. And all my liberal friends are high-fiving. Yeah, we're with you. But then when Obama does the same thing, they were like, no, Obama's a cool guy, man. He won the Nobel Peace Prize. His bombs are peaceful and loving. They're not like Bush's bombs. Even though he's continuing the same war that we complained about Bush going into, when Obama does it, it's cool. When Obama uses the intel agencies based on opposition research to spy on his political enemies, that's cool, that's hip, that's all right. But if Trump did it, he's an authoritarian dictator that needs to spend the rest of his life behind bars. Do you see the insanity of this? And that's what I'm talking about. It's not that the people matter. Right? It's not that Trump, to me, Hillary Clinton, yeah, she probably committed crimes that she was like, for example, she clearly committed the crime that someone on our team deleted subpoenaed emails, subpoenaed evidence by Congress. That's cut and dry crime, but no one was ever charged with that. That just shows the insanity. So yeah, that person, those people still should be held accountable. But those individuals going to prison or being held accountable as individuals is less important to me than we need to change the ability for this system to happen. Chuck Schumer went on national television and told us that a sitting president must have fear to criticize the intel agencies because if he speaks out against the intel agencies, they have 6 ways of Sunday of getting back at him. That should scare every single American, regardless if you're a Republican, Democrat, a Trump liker, a Trump disliker, etc. We're basically being told by one of the leaders of the major political parties in this country, we have to fear unelected bureaucrats because they have power over us. We can't criticize them. And he was right. And now we see the witch hunt. Schumer told us all in plain as day on television that's what would happen. Yet no one cared. All these mainstream media outlets that are supposedly journalists, they didn't care. They didn't care to speak truth to power. They cared to be allies of that power and to spin a false narrative and a collusion narrative lie because it helped their side. Again, Matt Taibbi in that article says he talked to several journalists that had doubts about a lot of what they were reporting. But what they said was, well, what's the alternative? Help Trump? That's how they feel. They're not journalists. They've chosen a side. They're hashtag resistance. It's their job to speak on behalf of the intel agencies and the establishment Democratic Party. That's why they'll go after someone like Tulsi Gabbard as well. Tulsi Gabbard's anti-war. Okay, she's an outsider. We'll attack her as well. We'll spew all kinds of lies about her being connected to Russia as well, just like they did with Jill Stein. So we could see the game. We know what's going on. It's a lie, and it's very dangerous. So we need so this is a long way of getting around to this point. I won't be satisfied until Trump and his administration starts investigating the previous administration for their weaponization of the intel agencies. If that doesn't happen, this isn't a victory today. The intel agencies will go on unabated. They'll continue to do this. The establishment Democrats and even some establishment Republicans will continue to weaponize the intel community. The mainstream media, which is 95% of it, will continue to operate as mouthpieces for the intel community. They'll continue to operate as mouthpieces for the establishment Democrats to spin lies. Academia will do the same. The entertainment industry will do the same. Silicon Valley will do the same. And slowly but surely, the population starts to believe more and more and more lies until we wake up and we're in George Orwell's 1984. Look at the Covington case, just for a little microcosm of what we're talking about. We're literally told we had to ignore black adult racists that were screaming at children and a Native American that thought that those black racists were making great points, who got in those children's face beating a drum while his Native American cohort screamed at them to go back to Europe. The kids were the bad ones. They were the racist. That's the sort of double thing, face crimes, from 1984 that we're talking about. Now take that in a far more grandiose scale. Trump's a warmonger for wanting to pull troops out. Trump's a warmongering dictator for wanting to talk to enemies like North Korea and try to de-escalate nuclear tensions. Do you start to see where this is going? And so until we hold this sort of thing accountable, this corruption, and if you root out the corruption at that level, if you start by holding people accountable and having an investigation and transparency to the American people that shows just how corrupt things occurring in the Obama administration were, like the start of the Russia investigation from the Obama administration, once people start being held accountable, all the rest will start to solve itself. Now, it won't be the end-all be-all, but if you start to charge people like James Comey for their role in what they did, or John Brennan, or Clapper, or people in the Obama administration, if they start to be charged, again, I'm not talking about things like, even though I think Hillary should have been charged, that's less important to me. That was her committing a crime that benefited her specifically. That's not the weaponization, her weaponizing the intel community. It wasn't her that did that. She was a candidate. The person that was in charge of that intel agency was Barack Obama. If those people would start to be held accountable, then the media wouldn't be able to stymie. They wouldn't be able to hold back the flood of people being like, the average person being like, wait, what? Why didn't the media talk about any of this? And it would totally destroy their credibility. Forcing a new wave, it would destroy the credibility of academia. All these people that say that they're concerned about things like they don't want dictatorships, they don't want abuse of power by the president, how evil Trump was, how glorious Obama was, how we must always trust the intel agencies. That entire narrative would be shattered if the investigation was transparent and those people started to be held accountable. It is. It's not just the mainstream. Yes, the mainstream media is colluding with the intel agencies and Obama, people that were working on the behest of Barack Obama and the rest of the Democratic establishment to overthrow a sitting president. That is exactly what happened. So people need to be held criminally accountable. Now, it's a little more sketchy when you get talking to the media, because it would be, unless the media is actively breaking, like there's no law against lying to people on the media. But there is a law against weaponizing the intel agencies. And so if those people start to be charged, that'll prove the media lied, and then hopefully it's not that they have to go to jail, it's just their credibility is destroyed, and the average person will stop listening to them. So that's what I'm waiting for. Until that day comes, this is just a small victory. But it is a victory, and it's worth celebrating. So, again, my conclusions on this is I still want to see the actual Mueller document. Not that I think that it's all going to be on the up and up, necessarily, because, I mean, it could be. I don't know. The thing is, I want to see Mueller's evidence. That's just it. Let's see what he says. Even though I don't trust the guy for the reasons I said earlier, even he, though, says that there was no Russia collusion, that narrative's dead. I mean, just think of the magnitude of this. Let's say you're Don Lemon, right? I happened to see a little bit of him today. You've spewed this lie for almost 3 years now. Every night. On and on and on. And you basically just got slapped in the face and said everything you've been talking about. your dreams, when you get giddy, when you, oh, the Russians, it's all been a lie. And so do you come on and you say, oh my God, I feel terrible. This is a huge story. Me and this entire network and all of our sister networks and, you know, all the newspapers and, you know, we brought on these former intel people like Brennan to talk, and it was all a lie. It was all wrong. We're really sorry. We need to really look into ourselves and what happened. Did they say that? They said, yeah, Barr said that there was no collusion, and but he said that they weren't charging Trump for obstruction, but they didn't exonerate him. This is what Lemon said. This raises more questions than it solves. You know, oh, and Trump said that he was exonerated. That's a lie. That's what Trump does. That's it. That's how they covered it. It's unbelievable. The arrogance and the lack of self-awareness is unbelievable. Yeah, you're right. The DNC knows that we'll never see the full report. There'll be some redactions. Barr put in the actual letter he signed today that it is illegal for him to release things involving a grand jury unless he goes through a court. No doubt that court will say some of it could be released, some can't. But the DNC knows this. Of course they know it, because when Trump was talking about, hey, we want to declassify things like the Carter Page FISA application, the Democrats were out there saying, no, we can't do that. It would be illegal for Trump to do that. It would hurt investigations and stuff. So we know that they know that. We know that they're not stupid. They understand what the law is involving grand jury testimony and what could be released. But they're out there pushing it because they know the average person doesn't know that. And so for the people, like I said, there was a Fox News report I saw today that said 42%, this was from 2 days ago, 42%, Fox News, mind you, 42% of people polled thought that Trump and his administration did not conspire with Russia to help with the 2016 election. But 2 more percent, 44% actually thought that that did happen. With no evidence whatsoever. Let's see what the numbers are now that the Mueller investigation says, no, that never happened. There'll still be large swaths of people that will just refuse to accept that. Even though they told all of us for years, oh, Mueller will have the goods. We'll trust Mueller. Got to believe Mueller. Mueller's a good guy. Now all of a sudden he'll be a bad guy. Or he was incompetent. Or he didn't investigate the things he should. Same with, that's what they said with the House Oversight Committee's investigation. That's what they said with the Senate investigation. 3 investigations now have concluded there was no Russia collusion. Well, not enough. We need to subpoena 81 people connected to Trump, says Adam Schiff. Not enough, says Nadler. We need to have more investigations. And so that they're just going to keep spinning the lie. And they know if people are willing to believe the garbage, so many people are willing to believe that Trump colluded and conspired with Russians to steal the election with no proof whatsoever. They know that then they can then sell lies to those same people saying, oh yeah, now Barr, you know, Trump's guy Barr, he won't release the information. They know the average person's not going to look and say, well, wait a minute, it would be illegal for Barr to release this information. He has to go through a court. So it doesn't matter if Barr was picked by Trump. An independent court's going to have to decide the issue anyways. It has no idea with Trump's, you know, people that he picked being the people to do this. But that'll be the lie that's told. And they know that the average person, and I'm not even blaming the average person. It's easy to be lied to. I've been duped before, you know. If you're not someone who has the time like me to sit here and look at all this stuff and understand exactly what's going on, it's easy to be duped, especially when all the cultural institutions of power are feeding you the same line of crap over and over and over. Eventually, you're going to believe it when everything you tune into says the same thing. And so, of course, they'll just keep the lie up, unabashedly, shamelessly. And why wouldn't they? Is there ever any accountability? Was there accountability for anyone in the media when they were wrong about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq? Nope. What incentive does the media have to stop the Russian narrative? They hate Trump. They know that it's helping the Democrats. They know that if they admit they're wrong, that that'll help Trump significantly. And they're making millions of dollars and getting huge views, places like MSNBC pushing this crap. So why would they want it to end? Of course not. They have every incentive to keep it going. They've got away with it. No one's ever held accountable as a journalist when they push obviously fake lies. Didn't happen with the WMD situation. Didn't happen with the Covington situation. Didn't happen with the Smollett situation. And you could go on and on and on. Heck, just look at the cases. Again, go back to that Matt Taibbi article. The video I did about the liberal journalist showing how this will destroy media credibility. He points out case after case after case of all these networks being absolutely provably wrong in stories they reported about Russia. Was there any backlash? No, none whatsoever. If anything, they got more viewers. The zealots that wanted to believe it believed it even stronger. These are the people that have the nerve. Remember when after the election they were saying, we need to crack down on fake news. We need to crack down on fake news. And here they are. Their biggest story of the past 2 years that they've been patting themselves on the back was a lie. Completely fed to them by intel community people. The people that push this are either so grossly ignorant and incompetent that they don't deserve to be journalists, or they're corrupt and they knew that it was garbage, which many of them were, and still knew that as part of the hashtag resistance that they still needed to do everything to take down Trump. They weren't journalists at all. They were activists to take down Trump. Activists that were working with the intel community that they're supposed to be speaking truth to power to. So, yeah, it will never be enough. So that's kind of my thoughts today. I'll be putting more videos out. Tomorrow at 1 o'clock, I'll put up a notice list, but tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern, I should be on my buddy Drone Tech's channel talking about a lot of this stuff. We'll go through a lot of it. And also, if you aren't subscribed to me, please give me a like and subscribe. I would really appreciate it so I could try to reach more people. I'm going to try to have conversations with other people and things like that, particularly people that disagree with me, because it's no fun just leaving me flat my fat gums over and over again. So it'd be nice to do something like that once in a while. But yeah, I'll talk specifically about more things. Sorry, I kind of had this weird setup. I wanted to get to more articles, but then I just started ranting and raving, so I didn't get to them. So yeah, again, please like and subscribe if you haven't, and hit the alert button so you can see more of my material. I try to put up at least a video every day, and I'll try to continue this week. So thanks everyone for listening in, and I look forward to talking tomorrow and hearing from you more later. So have a good one.